my sharing has disappeared on me. So, all right. So, what is a pitch deck? I'm just going to go ahead and talk you through some of this because, again, technical difficulties with Facebook. So, the first thing that you need to know is just what exactly is a pitch deck. So, if you've watched any of my other webinars, you'll know that the most important thing to do is to have a plan. And you have to really have not just a strategic plan, you need to really understand what your business plan is. So what are you trying to accomplish? You're trying to accomplish a couple of things, right? You're trying to tell your donors why this is important, the problem that you're trying to solve, why your solution is the actual solution, and how you can then solve that solution with an infusion of cash. And a lot of nonprofits don't take the time to think their way through how they're going to present that information to their donors. And unfortunately, what then happens is they go in to a 4, 5, or 6, or even a 7-figure ask, and they resort back to trying to tell the heart story and not making their case for support from a business perspective. And most major donors are business people. They are individuals who've made their money, usually entrepreneurs. They've made it through business, being executives, and so you have to talk their language if you're going to get them to invest. And investing is more than the donations you get when you just tell the story from the heart. So your pitch deck is going to be a summary of that business plan in more of a visual format. It's going to be a guide for you to walk through the different steps of your plan in a way that gives them the information they need in a very short period of time. Now, you might follow up with additional materials and things like and handouts like pro formas and diagrams and things, but the pitch deck is really what is this idea that you are proposing and how much is it going to cost and how you know you will be successful. So it's a presentation format. It also then can be used as a guide for your grants and your fundraising. So once you've conceived this pitch deck and once you've pulled everything together, it really helps you message what you're trying to accomplish in a much more effective way. And again, for many nonprofits, they have their elevator speech, but the elevator speech tends to be a heart-driven speech. It doesn't tell the story to a major investor of what you would do with $1 million and how you would change the world. That's what your pitch deck is going to do. So, what are the components that you need to make sure you have in your plan? Well, you need to make sure that you're really clear about what your mission is. What is it that the problem that you're trying to solve, and do you do that? And I know that sounds kind of simplistic, but a lot of nonprofits have not really clearly defined what it is that they do. They talk about the programs that they have, but when you look at the larger umbrella, the all-encompassing mission of what you're trying to accomplish, have you really clearly defined that? Or do you still go and tell people that your organization is a homeless shelter and we provide meals, shelter, housing, and connections to permanent housing? Those are listing your programs. It's not really telling about what the purpose of your organization is. Do you have a 5-year target? Do you know where you want to be in 5 years? That doesn't mean having a detailed plan because things change, but do you have a visual of where you want to be in 5 years? Are you really clear on who your target audience is in terms of clients as well as donors? And sometimes donors will be broken up into those that are for earned revenue, meaning you have programs where you generate revenue, or just donors that are going to invest in your program. So breaking that out and really having a clear understanding, like an entrepreneur would have of their clients, you need to have the same thing, both your target market for your donors and your target market for your clients. And then what makes you unique? How are you doing the work differently from, say, another homeless shelter or another animal rescue? What is it that your organization brings to the table that is different from everybody else? I sit on a board of an international nonprofit. We were actually going through this exercise this morning, and she founded the methodology that's being used all over the world. She's the only organization, or CEO of the only organization that's global. So we were able to lay out a few things that really make their organization unique. What is your proven process? What is it that you do that works? So, is it that training program? Is it the fact that you link people to a certain service? What is the secret sauce in your product that you're going to be able to sell to someone? And then we need to know about 3 years from now, what does that look like? How, if you are successful, what is it going to look like 3 years from now, and how much is it going to cost? So those are the components of your plan, and I've gone through that in a couple of my webinars, but I can't reiterate that enough. That is really different than a traditional strategic plan that might be pages and pages and sit on a shelf somewhere because it's got so much detail you really don't know where to start. So the next thing is we're going to talk about more depth about what those pitch decks look like. So you can go on the internet and you can Google pitch deck template. And everyone who pretty much who's starting up a new business, for-profit business, is going to use a pitch deck. It's something that's really common in the for-profit world, and it hasn't really caught up on the nonprofit side of things yet. So the pitch deck is a series of PowerPoint slides. It's pretty consistent when you're in a for-profit, when you're trying to take your company out and you're trying to get someone to invest in your company. So if you can think about what entrepreneurs do when they go and pitch to a venture capitalist, that's similar to what you're going to be doing when you go and you pitch to a major donor. And having this really crafted well will also get those board members who don't donate convinced that you're going to be accomplishing something really exciting, and you'll see your board members get more engaged and more excited too as you start to communicate your plan through this pitch deck. So let's talk about what the components are, because if you Google a pitch deck on the internet, it is different than what you're going to find on a nonprofit pitch deck. And there's some subtle differences, but they are really important. So the first slide, if you're taking notes, and this will be saved on Facebook so you can come back and watch this again, the first slide of your pitch deck is going to be the history. Now, we're not just looking for, we were founded in 1968. That's really not what we're looking for. We want to know why. Why were you founded? What prompted the founder or the group of individuals to pull together and create this nonprofit? What was that catalyst and that spark? That is going to tell your investors a lot more about the history and the background of your organization than just these details that you normally put in a grant. And in fact, research shows that if you can talk about the catalyst and the why, it catches their attention a lot quicker in the presentation than just the boring recounting of when and where and how you were founded. So that's slide number one, is your history of your organization. Slide number two is going to be your accomplishments. So this is kind of your proof of concept in the for-profit side. What is it that you have accomplished, your organization has accomplished in the 10, 12, 100 years that it's been in existence? And if you're a new startup, and if you just started your organization, maybe you don't have a lot of experience behind you, but more than likely, some people, probably in a volunteer format, are probably doing the work or have been doing the work. So you do have some background that you can go ahead and you can follow. So proof of concept is next. What have we accomplished? And it could be, again, we don't want just outputs. If you watched my last webinar, we want outcomes. So you've been able to reduce the rate of reincarceration of individuals who have gone to prison. You have been able to get kids graduated and onto Ivy League schools. You have maybe you've been able to ensure that 500 families have gotten homes. So proof of concept, we've done this, we're good, we've succeeded. If you're doing a capital campaign, this might also be where you talk about that you've done other phases of capital campaigns successfully. I know when I was on a seventh um, phase of a capital campaign at an organization that I ran, one of the things that we did in our pitch deck is we talked about the fact that we had successfully completed 6 phases of the capital campaign on time, under budget, and without any debt. Again, proof of concept, accomplishments that are related to your plan. So now the next slide in your PowerPoint presentation, this is going to be either slide 3 or 4, is going to be, what is the problem? What is the horrible thing that's going on right now that requires a response from your organization? So the problem, the why. Why now? Not just why, but why now? So right now we have a pandemic. Right now we have racial inequity that has really risen to the surface and must be addressed. We have issues with sexual harassment. We have all sorts of issues, but what is it right now that is the pressing problem that you're trying to solve? Why you need money? So that's the why now. And that can be some statistics. It can be visually displayed in your PowerPoint presentation, but it needs to be an urgent call to action. The next slide or 2 is going to be how you propose to solve the problem. So what are the things that you feel like your organization can do to fix this problem? Now, we're not at this point really talking about specific programs. We're talking about what are the solutions. So if the solution is that 40% of people are behind in their mortgage and their rent and at risk of becoming homeless, your solution is to create a system that identifies these individuals before they've fallen too far behind, works with the banks, and then ensures that they can stay in their home. Just making that up. But that might be a solution that you have. What your programs are called is something completely different. So we want to have the solutions in what I call buckets. And so each bucket, solution bucket, is going to accomplish a certain thing. It may be that one of those things that you're trying to accomplish is building a building. So if it is, you're going to expand services through the building of a new recreation facility. Then you're going to enhance outreach into a specific community through an enhanced education program about nutrition. And then maybe the 4th bucket is you're going to supply fresh produce and protein in a food desert area. Again, whatever the buckets or the solution buckets are. The next slide would then be more specifically about the programs that you're going to be offering. Now, these may or may not be the ones that you currently have, but these are the ones that are going to be what your proposed solution is to fix those buckets. Then we need to know on the next slide, what are the outcomes that you're going to have. So if we're successful, again, this doesn't have to be by program, but if you are successful, if those programs do what you say they are going to do to address that problem, what's going to happen? This is where we really need to make sure you're using outcomes, not outputs. It's not a matter of 150 kids are going to participate in recreation programs. It has to be about what will happen to those children because they participated in those recreational activities. Children will graduate from school on time. There'll be a decrease in discipline referrals. There'll be a decrease in obesity and diabetes rates in that geographic area. All of these things are really important because those outcomes are what's going to be meaningful to that donor. And as you start to customize the deck based on the donor you're talking to, you're going to emphasize those particular outcomes. So for instance, if I have a hospital and one of those hospital's priorities is addressing mental health issues, I'm going to focus on the fact that our program reduces PTSD symptoms in the individuals who participate within 3 sessions by 80%. That's going to be a very clear outcome that's going to be meaningful to that specific donor. And then I might hone in even more on that. But that's how you can start to customize this, is by the outcomes, not by the programs. So the next slide is going to be the budget. Now, this is going to be a high level budget. You're not going to do anything really detailed, but basically this is how much money you need to raise. And it can either be by bucket, so we can have it broken out by a line item that says capital construction, program services, and maybe capacity building, or mental health services. And you could break it out by the different aspects of whatever you broke those buckets into. Then we would have all of that with a total amount. That total amount is essentially what you're going to try to raise over a 3-year period. Now, when you go out and you start doing major gifts, you want to get away from the year-to-year annual fund mentality. Nobody runs a business like that in the for-profit world. Nobody would try to say, okay, this year I have to raise this amount of money, and I'm not even going to think about year 2. Now, they do a multi-year pro forma, and that's what you're going to need to do in that plan that we discussed at the beginning of this webinar. That pro forma will be rolled together, and that becomes your campaign budget. And yes, you can do a campaign that's not for bricks and mortar, but is in fact for operating. Once you know how much it's going to cost to run your program for the next 3 years, you can hit that as a target instead of the 1 year, which then becomes this hamster wheel of having to go over and over again of recreating how are we going to hit this number that we need for this year. Now you're doing a long-term strategy that involves major donors. And the great news is it only takes about 10 to 12 people to fund 60% of that 3 years, as opposed to hundreds and hundreds if you try to do an annual fund. So the next slide is going to be your team. Who is it that's going to help you pull this off? This is going to be also very important. So this may be your executive director. It may be your CFO. It might be key members of your board of directors or advisory board members. Or if you are launching a campaign, who's that campaign cabinet? That would also go here. Basically, the team slide is going to give the donor the confidence that you have the skill set to pull this off. That the team that's there actually has the expertise and the bandwidth to do what you're proposing. Then you can also have another slide, which is partners. It's always good to emphasize that your partners in this plan, you're not trying to go it alone, you're not trying to reinvent the wheel, but that you're actually working with other individuals. This also gives you credibility, because if those partners are involved with your plan, it shows that they're buying into it as well. And then the last slide or two is going to be where you really start to customize your pitch deck. That customization is going to be focused on the ask. You never, ever, ever go in to a meeting with a major donor without a really clear understanding of what the ask is. We're going to talk about that in just a second. So just to recap this part, the components that you need for your pitch deck: history, accomplishments, why now, what is the problem, what's the solution that you're proposing, what are the outcomes, how will you know that you're successful, and how will your donor know that you're successful, how much is it going to cost over 2 to 3 years to pull this off, who's the team that's going to deliver the solutions, and finally, who else is involved, and then what are you going to ask. So how do I use this deck? Now I've got this beautiful PowerPoint deck. How do I use it? Well, first of all, you need to build it and brand it. Add colors. Now, the worst possible thing you can do is lots and lots of content on these slides. In fact, it's the one thing that when I'm working with a client, I typically will do is I will take the entire thing that they just wrote on the slide and I'll put it in the comments at the bottom. And then just let them pick out 2 or 3 sentences and very brief. Typically, you really don't want more than about 5 or 6 words, if you can keep to that, and a great visual picture. Remember, we don't want them reading the deck. We want the slide to be a visual cue for you to then have a conversation with your donor about your talking points. So if you're talking about the problem, you might have a picture of a homeless person, or maybe you'd even have a picture of a crumbling part of your building, or where you are out over capacity and don't have the ability to serve everyone, or waiting a long line around a building. The things that visually tell you what the problem is, or what the solution is, but not tons of content. So create your talking points. The other thing that this will do is it will allow other people who need to use the deck to be consistent. So if you have a board member, or if you have another staff member that's going to go out and use the deck, then they're also going to be using the same talking points that you're using, and you're not going to be venturing off and creating new solutions and using other examples that aren't really relevant to what you're trying to accomplish. Again, don't read the slide. Talk to the donor, make eye contact. You're using the deck, and I even actually will use sometimes my iPad to show them what's happening, to use them as a conversation starter and to make the conversation flow, but you're not reading from it. You're using it as visuals. Personalize it to the donor as well. Again, think about what this donor really cares about. What are the outcomes that they care about? What are they interested in a naming opportunity? Then you can actually, I go into Canva, which is great, and it's free for nonprofits. I go in and I will actually use an image, like a building, and put the donor's name on it, or create some sort of personalization, which is really helpful. Then always know what the ask is, as I mentioned before. The ask doesn't necessarily have to be money in the first meeting. It certainly probably shouldn't be unless this is a really engaged donor like a board member. But always know what the ask is. Are you asking them for more involvement? Are you asking them for another meeting? Are you asking them for their thoughts and their feedback? And if you are, make sure that you're actually going to listen to what they have to say and sincerely incorporate their thoughts and feedbacks into your plan. Or are you asking them for a very specific dollar amount? And probably the number one reason that nonprofits don't have major gifts is because they don't ask. They assume that people will give them money, or they go in and they say, we'd like you to donate, and then they don't ask for a specific amount of money. Always know how much money you are going to ask for if you are going in for an ask. And if you aren't sure of how much that person should be asked, then by all means, reach out to somebody like our team at Sharity or another consulting firm, and make sure that you've done a wealth engine screen on that donor so you have an idea of what might be a reasonable amount for them to give. And finally, be prepared to shift. You'll never quite know what will happen when you're in a meeting. And I've actually had people ask me to give them a larger proposal and ask for more money. I've had them come back and say something has just recently happened with their life and they need to do something different. So have several options and be prepared to shift. Also be prepared to tell them that you'll think about it and get back to them. You don't have to answer every question in that meeting, and it's better to wait and then to answer a question or respond to a question and get it wrong. All right, so what else can your deck have? So decks are really flexible, and you can do a lot of really great creative things with them. So don't just think about pictures. Think about the photos, really good photos that come from your nonprofit. Diagrams, site plans are also a really great thing to put in there. And you know what? If you don't have them already, there's lots of great photos out on the internet, and I've used just photos that I've pulled off the Internet of Things. Videos can also be inserted in the deck. Typically, if I'm going to do a video to go with my deck, the video will follow the deck, meaning it will start off really talking about the history, the problem, the solution, the outcomes, and then it will wrap up with what our solution is, and visually with images of the new building, a new property, new programs, kids playing in a new environment, whatever that might be. But the video would then be maximum of 3 minutes, and it would really encompass what you're trying to accomplish. And then you can use that video for other things as a standalone, but it's fine to embed it into your PowerPoint. You can also put quotes and testimonials from clients or a short little video clip from a client. And you can also, again, as I mentioned before, do those graphic images of what the naming opportunity would be like. So unfortunately, I'm not sharing my screen with you right today, but we'll put some of these visuals up on our Facebook page, and we'll be able to show you what the examples look like. I'm sure Claire, who's on our team, will be able to craft these into social media posts. But one of the examples is that just to use the outcomes as a big visual. So a picture on one side, and then, for instance, I'm working with a client that does re-entry from prison, and there's a 90-day window where a person is either successful or fails. And if they fail, 60% of them will go back to prison if they fail to meet the tasks that they have to meet within this 90-day window after getting released from prison. So I just would create a big slide that just had that big number and a little bit of graphic. 90-day window, success or failure, 60%, and then a picture. Nothing more than that. Very simple. But then I'm going to talk to that, and I'm going to talk about how critical that window is. For history, you can start with telling the story. One of my favorites is an equine therapy program that started because one woman who had a horse had a friend who had a disabled child. And from there, that became the equine therapy program. And now they're serving not only children and adults with disabilities, but individuals with brain injuries, teens and adults with mental health issues, human trafficking survivors, and veterans. So again, it's history, but it's more about the why it was founded, the spark, along with a great picture of a volunteer and a child on a horse. You can also use those graphs that I mentioned. And one thing that donors want to know is how sustainable, how are you going to afford this new building if you build it? And so being able to talk about where your revenue streams come from. No donor is going to invest a large amount of money if they think that you're not going to have the funding to be able to support the programs long term. And finally, you can use that the graphic image, like I said, the Canva. There are lots of great opportunities. One of the examples that I created was Mark and Jenny Smith, and there was a human trafficking awareness app. And so I've got a picture of a smartphone with the app and an image on that. And you can show how you would have their name or their logo and their brand. It's a really easy thing to do, and it's super, super easy to do with the free graphics that are out there today. So we're going to take some questions, but one of the things that I want to do first is tell you about how you can take your nonprofit to the next level. Because what I just went through and a couple of the other webinars that I've done recently is part of what we do in our mastermind series. So the mastermind series is a nonprofit accelerator, and it takes you through 5 intensive sessions plus a 6th bonus session. These 5 intensive sessions walk your nonprofit through the process of developing your business plan, identifying your team and your team's strengths and weaknesses, creating that budget, the donor list, and ultimately a pitch deck. The 6th session, you actually take that pitch deck and you pitch it to a philanthropist. Now, normally when I am hired by clients, they spend thousands of dollars to hire me. Well, we're doing this with small groups. So 5 or 6 nonprofits get together. We run you through this program over the course of 5 weeks. It's very intense, but at the end, you're going to be ready to go out and start doing those major donor asks. And you're going to have a really clear plan that's going to get people really excited about where you're going. So the next session is completely full, but we are having a special today through the end of March. We've got 5 slots available for the next session, which starts May 11th. And you can go on to charityglobal.com onto our website and you can sign up or find out more. We even have a PDF that you can download if you need more information to give to your board of directors. But the 5 slots that are available through March 31st, if you sign up by then, you get our 50% off rate. After March 31st, starting April 1st, our price does go up. We are increasing it to $18.75. So if you're interested in the accelerator, trust me, one major gift ask and you've already made this up. It's worth it. My clients consistently see double-digit increases in their fundraising in the first year. Many of them see a significant amount more than that. So I hope you can join me with the next accelerator class. We're going to be starting one next week, and then we'll have the next accelerator class again starting soon. So with that, I am going to take questions. And let's see here. So if you have a question, go ahead and put it into the comments and I will start answering all of your questions and comments. And again, you have to bear with me here. I am so new to this whole Facebook Live process here. So first question is from Heidi. Is a pitch deck kind of like a case statement? Yes and no. So a case for support typically is going to be a document, a Word document that's going to have information in there about what your nonprofit does, why it does it. It might have some of the outcomes, but it's very different than a business plan. And really, the difference is that a business plan is going to give very clear metrics for where you want to be and how much it's going to cost. Your case for support typically is going to be a foundational document that has narrative that you can use in different parts of a grant, for instance, or a proposal. But it's not going to be the same thing as being able to sit down and explain your business plan to a philanthropist for a 6-7 figure ask. And that's really the biggest difference. You would never hand your case for support to somebody. The pitch deck you could actually send, or, you know, especially with the pandemic, you can actually tell your story over a live meeting on Zoom or in face-to-face. So let's see. I see my team's been doing a really great job of putting information out there about what the components are. Let's see. Other questions. If you use a picture of a falling down building to depict a problem, would you then want to show a new building for the solution slide? Absolutely. Good point. So when I had one of the phases of capital campaigns that I did, we had a building, actually we had several buildings that were literally, the roof was getting ready to fall in. They were in such bad shape. And oftentimes donors want to know, first and foremost, why aren't you just rehabbing this building as opposed to tearing it down and building new? And I think sometimes they think that we should always be reusing everything as nonprofits. And the reality is that sometimes it just doesn't make financial sense to do that. So we told the story in such a way that it was the love and wear and tear. And hundreds of handprints and hundreds of feet had walked those floors, and the number of people that had spent the night in those bedrooms and found safety. But that now was the time to provide a better and more beautiful trauma-informed setting for those individuals. And then we showed the pictures of the new building. So we did it in a way where we honored the past because there was some history there. Our original building had been a safe house, had been someone's home that they used to hide people in. And then we moved forward and talked about the new building. So yes, great question, Muffet. Um, so what's the ideal number of slides? So there really isn't an ideal amount, but there is too many. So I like to try to do my pitch decks in under 10 slides. You can do a few more than that, but remember, you need to be able to tell the story in under 10 minutes. You typically, when you're talking to a major donor, they're planning on only giving you 30 minutes of time. So you need to be able to go in, succinctly tell your story, walk them through all the different components of your plan, and be done to answer questions and have a conversation when within about 10 to 15 minutes. That leaves the rest of the time for you just to have a conversation, to get feedback from them, or to do that ask. And then what I always tell my clients is you do the ask and then you sit on your hands. You do not speak until they respond first. Um, that's really critically important. And so don't put too much content in the slides and don't have too many slides. If you are having trouble with that, that's where someone else outside of your organization is a good one to practice with. And if you are going to go out and do ask, I always say, you always do your inner circle first. So you should tell your board members that they're going to be the first people that you ask for money. So you're going to actually practice on them, but it also then gets you that 100% giving that you have to have anytime you're going to do a campaign. And it doesn't let them kind of get out of not giving a major gift because they have to sit through the whole presentation and actually give you good feedback about it. So Nikki asks, is it awkward to pull out your pitch deck during a donor meeting? Should you prepare them that you'll be giving a presentation? Well, now remember, you're not like projecting this up onto a slide. You're going to have something, and I actually have my iPad right here, where you might just be scrolling through it and explaining it. So are you going to be letting them know that you're going to be bringing a pitch deck? Well, you're going to tell them why you're coming. I don't believe in surprising donors at all, especially major donors. And I have a lot of clients that sometimes get really anxious about bringing me along as the hired gun. Um, Major donors get asked for money all the time, and they're used to seeing a consultant. It's absolutely fine to bring your consultant. And if they say no to the meeting, that means they're not ready for an ask. That means you need to be doing more cultivation. When the consultant comes in with you, or when your major, your development officer comes with you on the visit, they know why you're there. So absolutely, it's not awkward to pull it out, but do not pull it out on paper. Make sure you have an iPad. Make sure you have a Microsoft Surface, some sort of computer screen that's large enough for the donor to see, but you can sit and scroll, and it's got a touch screen and you can walk them through it. Or again, if you're doing it on Zoom, you're going to screen share and walk them through it. So any tips for pitching donors over Zoom? Well, that's really a important thing right now. Um, Absolutely, you can pitch donors over Zoom. The important thing to remember again about donors is that you don't ever ask anybody to for money unless you're 100% sure that they're ready and they're cultivated. That means you've already had a conversation with them about the project, about the program, and you know pretty much how they're going to respond to your pitch. So as you're walking them through as you're setting up the appointment, first of all, um, they're going to know why you're coming because you're going to tell them, hey, we're excited. We want to update you on what's happening. If you're just going to be, again, updating them, and we really want to get your feedback. That should always be the first meeting is we want to get your feedback and your thoughts and ideas about the plan because people who help build the plan are more likely to fund the plan. You don't ever want to go in and say, hey, we didn't ask you if you thought this was a good idea or not, but we want you to give us money. So always do that first. And so the pitch deck obviously could be more of a rough draft the first time. You can talk them through it and say, hey, this is what we're thinking. This is kind of the ideas behind why we're doing this and how much we think it's going to cost. Um, Sometimes people pay tens of thousands of dollars for a feasibility study from a consulting firm. Personally, I think that's a huge waste of money. I think you do need to do a feasibility study, but why would you hire someone to confidentially meet with your donors without you present, and then you wouldn't know what that donor thought? It's really silly if you think about it. So back to the Zoom meetings. Absolutely. Just like you would have a normal meeting. If someone is uncomfortable with a face-to-face meeting, although that's now with the vaccines, that's starting to get fewer and fewer. If someone's uncomfortable with that, set up a Zoom call. Or you can do it over the phone. It's not as effective. And I would never do an ask over the phone. I would figure out a way to do it either via Zoom, where I could see them face to face and I can see how they're responding, or I would do it I would actually meet with them face to face, even if that meant hopping on a plane and flying. I've literally flown to New York, done an ask, and got on a plane and turned around and flown back home. So it doesn't look like there's any other questions, but I'm hoping that all of you will now have a better idea of what a pitch deck is and how you can use that to go out and land that 4, 5, 6, 7-figure ask. It's really so much more effective than just sitting and having a conversation when you're likely to revert back to the whole heart poll. It's also will really impress your donors, your board members, that you've thought this through, that you really have a good strategy, you know how much it's going to cost, and you know what it's going to take to pull it off. So thank you so much. If you have any other questions or you would like to see some examples, be happy to share those with you. Feel free to direct message us, or you can comment here on the slide deck. We'll be monitoring the comments, or you can always reach out to me on our homepage, charityglobal.com. Go through the contact or email me at carol.wick@charityglobal.com. And don't forget the Mastermind series. Next one starts in May, but that'll be here before you know it. And a lot of people have to get them approved by their boards. Don't miss out on that reduced price. I promise that you will really get a lot out of that accelerator course. And great, I'm seeing a lot of people want to see those examples. We'll make sure that we get those available to you. And have a fabulous, fabulous day. Thanks, everybody.